Nancy Cardwell, as you all know, is our guest tonight, and Mike Smith's going to introduce her and help tell her story to you and for us. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you, Kurt. Very appreciated. Wow. Really a good crowd tonight, considering the weather, I suppose, but that's enough about the weather. Nancy Cardwell Webster is an old and dear friend of mine, and she has a solid history in bluegrass music, and not only here locally, as we'll find out too, but worldwide impact on bluegrass and promoting bluegrass music. And her reach is just beyond measure, and we'll find out more about it. Currently, she is the Executive Director of the IBMA, International Bluegrass Music Association Foundation, with a mission to raise money to help promote bluegrass.
To make the future of bluegrass music brighter.
There we go.
Sounds better than raise money, Mike.
Yeah. She's the former Executive Director of the IBMA. We will get into all of that. Welcome, if we will, Nancy.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here.
Thanks for being here, y'all. It's good to see. It's good to see a lot of familiar faces, and former band members, and old friends. Yeah.
For Nancy, it all started being the daughter of some bluegrass musicians, and in fact, her father's history in the business locally and regionally here as well. Tell us about your mom and dad.
Sure. Well, everybody say hello to Mom. She's sitting right there.
Yeah, Wanda
Hey, Mom.
Cardwell right here.
Front row over here. We had a family band, the Cardwell Family Band in the 70s, but before that my dad had a band called Marvin Cardwell and the Ozark Country Boys, and Kathy, because he had a girl singer named Kathy Keel, who would sing the Loretta Lynn songs. But anyway, they played a lot of the county fairs and coon hunts and festivals and things like that. I remember as an elementary age kid, it was fun to go to see Dad's band play because I liked to ride the Ferris wheel and all the rides and things like that. And so when I was 7 and my sister was 5 and Ray was 3, we would get up on stage and I could play the mandolin with 2 fingers because my hands were very small at age 7. And our big hits were Froggy Winnacorton and Do Lord and This Land Is Your Land. And Dad also, his band had a live radio show in Aurora, Missouri, and it was sponsored by his cousin, Norris J. Crouch. And so it was live, and I still have reel-to-reel tapes of it. Wow. And we would, be the guests. The kids would get up and sing a song, that sort of thing. So that's how I grew up, hearing, seeing band practice in the living room and seeing my dad play. And then when we got to be teenagers and learned to play instruments a little bit and sing together, we had the Cardwell Family Band. And the poster of Dad's band right there, the Ozark Country Boys, that was sometime in the 60s, probably 1965, and he had a show. He had the 3rd country music show in Branson after the Bald Numbers and the Plumbers, and they had an outdoor stage, and it was at Jesse James Confusion Hill, which was kind of a little tourist trap place, and they had a horse that reared up in the air, and a little place where you could pan for gold, and one of those little houses you would walk through where the floors were crooked, and you felt like you were one of those, and it had a little general store. But it was just a lot of fun, and he did that several summers, and we would get up and play some music. And it was a combination of country music and bluegrass. Dad would switch off on the mandolin and the electric guitar. And I remember, it was outdoors, and whenever, I think it was John Brayfield, who also went to church with us, would sing Black Cloud Hanging Over My Head. It would usually rain. So we would try to get him not to sing that song.
I'm still trying to get over the fact that you were on the radio before I was.
Oh, yeah, Mike. What's up with that? Slacker. Yeah, I have the proof.
Well, from there it moved on. You got your chops there. You and your brother both, and your sister learned your chops there as a member. Well, watching the Ozark Country Boys being there, and they're on the radio and all that stuff. And then the Cardwell Family Band formed. So tell us how that all came about. It seems like a natural progression.
Yeah, I don't remember exactly how it started. I know that Dudley Murphy was working at the Springfield Art Museum, and he had some music shows there that he wanted to feature bluegrass and old-time music, and our family played there several times. And a musicologist from Springfield, Max Hunter, was organizing some shows, and he wanted bands to do songs that were written before 1900, and you couldn't wear a wristwatch. You had to wear long dresses, and we loved that, because we knew a lot of old songs. Dad had a really good memory, and he remembered a lot of songs from when he was growing up, and we also learned some songs from Max's collection in the library that are still here in Springfield in the library. And so that was very enjoyable. We played, at Silver Dollar City at the first Ozark, tell me, DA, Ozark Mountain Music Festival, is that right? Yeah, I think that's what it was called. Yeah, Dad and Susan and I played in '75, and then we played in '76. So it was a long time ago, before the Undergrass Boys were there. Yeah. But it was a lot of fun. It was a fun place to grow up. And so we played at church, and we played for, just local events. I remember we played for a show here in Springfield once where they were trying to break the world record for the largest salad. I think Mueller was involved, and they had made this huge spun steel salad bowl, and they were stirring the salad with rakes, garden rakes, and serving it to people. They were clean, on paper plates, and they called us the Crouton Family Band, and they had dancing vegetables. They had people dressed up like tomatoes and things like that. So I played a lot of really unusual gigs, but it was fun. It was a fun way to grow up.
I'm glad we're fulfilling our mission tonight here, talking about Springfield and the area's music history, I think, very well, in fact. Well, from there on, the family band, again, you and your brother and your sister got your chops going on there, and things became, time went on, and you then became members of other bands as things went on, including, who remembers, Homegrown with Frank, her deceased husband, Frank Erdos, D.C. Cunningham. Was Ernie Bishop there?
He was. Barry Wynn played before him.
Wynn.
Barry Smith played some in that band, and a guy named Jason Thomas from Canada. But usually it was Frank and Donnie and me. Of course, they'd been going on for years before I came on the scene. I was much younger than those guys. So I was kind of in the last chapter of Homegrown.
But who remembers Frank, and what an amazing human being he was.
And I did play, I stole the Homegrown name when I was in college. I think I told Frank, I'm not sure if I did. I was in a country rock band in college at Northwest Missouri State and sang Linda Ronstadt songs, and we were called Homegrown.
Oh.
Yeah.
So stolen.
Yeah, and then we worked at, the family worked at Dog Patch once a week, and then Susan and Ray and I worked at Osage Beach. And we played bluegrass. We did 4 bluegrass shows a day, and we robbed the train 3 times. So we had to change costumes, Show business.
Sheila Renfro was a train robber, too, if
Really?
I recall. Yeah. Things happen in life. Tragedies sometimes occur in life and in families. And things happened in your family, Nancy. And you, with your love of bluegrass, you faced adversity in that regard with your husband and your sister's passing. You found the music found you a home, and you found a home in the music.
Yeah, it always has been.
Yeah. And an opportunity arose to take you out of town.
Right, yeah, I worked in the Branson area for a couple years before I left town and played some in a band that Bo Brown was in, and Kenny Key here, and sang with the Coventry Carolers with Connie and Kenny, who is here. And so played a lot of music, played some with Buddy Brayfield. I played in a duo with Jim Lansford when his wife Kim was teaching school. I would play the hammer dulcimer and he would play fiddle. And worked at the Engler Block and Mutton Hollow and Shepherd of the Hills, and wrote for a country music magazine in Branson, and also some for something called Branson This Week that the Springfield paper published for a while, once a week.
Yes, I think I skipped over before you left town.
Oh, that's
there,
okay.
yeah. All that stuff. Lots of writing. News leader for the at a Branson publication sponsored by the News Leader. You were a regular
Once a week,
contributor.
yeah.
And later in life, she was to earn a pretty substantial, I think, journalism award from Nashville. Let me look at this here. Let me find this out. The award you won for writing about bluegrass, the Charlie Lamb Award for Excellence in Country Music Journalism in the year 2006. And I looked up, Charlie Lamb is like the Nashville music writer, okay? And so much so that awards were given in his name, and in 2006, Nancy won that award for her journalism.
Mainly for writing about bluegrass, I think. They didn't give that award to a lot of bluegrass writers, so it was time. You know?
Yeah. Well, there's many more that they didn't give it to at all, right? Yeah. So congratulations on that.
Thank you.
Yeah, these bands locally, that you mentioned Midnight Flight for, you had a couple of gigs with.
I love playing with Midnight
them.
Flight, yeah.
Yeah. And
I hated to leave that band when I went to Owensboro, Kentucky, yeah.
Yes. Every Christmas, Nancy would sing Christmas music with a group called the Coventry Carolers, and that was a fun group.
Right. I was usually the alto. I can sing the high part, but I'd rather sing lower. It's easier.
Let's move on to the move out of town, which I tried to get to earlier, but I'm glad we didn't get that fast.
Well, I worked with the Wildwood Girls, and we worked at Dollywood on 3 days a week, and then we'd play festivals on the weekends. And we did a tour of military bases in Honduras and Panama. And Erin was just 2 years old then, and they were getting ready to go on a 2-month-long tour in Europe of military bases. And I just thought, that's too long to be away from a 2-year-old kid. And even though Grandma was a great babysitter. And so I came back to Branson and then worked a couple years then. And then I took the job with IBMA and went to Owensboro, Kentucky in 1994.
How did that come about? Someone called you and said, hey, I know of a job available. What happened there?
I just saw an ad in Bluegrass Unlimited magazine and applied. And the first time I applied, I didn't get the job. They hired somebody else. And then they let him go in a couple of years. And then I applied again, so.
Well, and Bluegrass Unlimited, if you're not familiar, it's the trade magazine for bluegrass music, and it's been around for a long time. I don't know when their first issues
My husband, who's sitting in the back, Bob Webster, could probably tell us that. Was it like 1966? When did BU start? 66, I guess, right. He's got every copy.
Wow.
So I don't have to try to keep them all anymore. He's got them all.
Well, Nancy started writing for them in her first article in 1981. Showed up in BU. And I was looking through the article there about Max Hunter in that issue. Doyle Lawson on the cover? Was that
J.D. Crowe.
J.D. Crowe, sorry. And opened up the second page of her article, and to show the reach of that magazine then, on the left-hand side is an ad for Diodario Strings with Dog Grisman there next to her story. So, you know, even in, that's just a sign of the reach there. Yeah,
they picked the name Bluegrass Unlimited because they wanted to have an unlimited perspective of bluegrass music. I wrote an article about the Undergrass Boys in there even, and Yonder Mountain String Band and Front Country and, you know, some bands like that. The Cardwell Family Band, I used a pseudonym. I guess I could let people know about this now. It's been, when I wrote about bands that I was in, I wrote about Frank once and Homegrown, I wrote about the Cardwells, and I used Kay Phillips, and Kay is my middle name, Phillips is Mom's maiden name, so now you know who that is, yeah.
Wow. And you've had 2 or 3 cover stories, right? We have 2 or 3?
Oh, more than that.
Oh, more than that.
Yeah,
okay.
I've lost track.
Oh, my gosh. Okay. Well,
that sounds egotistical, but it's true. I've forgotten
you.
how many articles I've written, yeah.
Wow, and a memorable one.
Covers pay more, so I'm always happy when you get a cover. Yeah.
A memorable one for the both of us is, was it 91? I don't know, 92 in...
Not sure.
Lawrence, Kansas. Was that where it was? The Hot Rise was playing in Lawrence, Kansas. I was the MC of the program, and Nancy and I went down there, and she was a writer for BU and the cover, and we talked to the boys over lunch with KSMU tape recorder on the table, and the cover story came out of that.
And it was the end of the band, which is unusual. I remember the editor saying, we don't normally publish articles about bands that are breaking up, but, you know, it was Hot Rise. It was a big deal. I think it was, the headline was the end of a 12-year rocket ride or something like that. So, and they went around the table, and Tim, of course, Tim O'Brien had a country music contract at the time that later fell through, and Nick Forster, the bass player, was going to play in his band, and Pete Wernick, you know, is always doing 5 or 6 things at once and had plans. And then Charles Sawtelle said, well, I've got a couple of weddings booked. You know, so I felt bad for Charles. But he did just fine, too. But that was the first time I met those guys. And thank you, Mike, for bringing me along for that.
It was...
And you did most of the talking, I think, on that one.
Well, it was a good time for me. I met some future lifelong friends. I met Harry Moore there for the first time, who became a co-host on my Bluegrass program. And was with me for 17 years. And my friend Calvin Holden was a Bluegrass fan. He was following Hot Rise, and I met him there for the first time and became friends with him there too. So
it's a good show.
It was a great show. Let's get back to that IBMA work and work that they do. Here you are. You answered the ad in the Bluegrass Unlimited magazine. We'll get back to this. And what was your first job there? And what was the first decision you made there?
The first decision I made?
Can you
Well, they
remember that?
hired me in September, which is right before the annual World of Bluegrass Week conference. And so it was, it was really busy and things were pretty crazy. And
your job title for that, was that special projects?
I was special projects coordinator, which I think my boss, Dan Hayes, had made that title very vague on purpose so he could ask me to do lots of things. But basically, I wrote everything for them. I wrote press releases and newsletters, and it was in charge of the professional development, seminars, the Leadership Bluegrass program when that started, the Bluegrass in the Schools program when that started. So anything related to writing or program or education or leadership, professional development, that was my department. But I think we just had 3 people on staff at that point, 3 or 4. We never had a lot of people, so.
And then...
But I think one of the first things I had to do, I had to call Wilma Cooper and tell her that she was getting a Distinguished Achievement Award. And, and it was just a week away, and it was, by the way, can you come to Kentucky and accept this award? So that was a little unnerving.
And that's an award that Nancy also received later in her career as well, the IBMA Distinguished Achievement Award. How many years in that position? How long as a special projects coordinator? And just think of all the people that you have met at special projects and later as the executive director of this international organization.
Sure. I'd like to recognize in the back corner there Mr. Alan Munday, member of the Bluegrass Hall of Fame.
Yep.
Yeah. He should get an applause and a salute or something every time he enters the room, I think. One of my favorite banjo players in the world.
Yeah.
Alan was on the IBMA board 1 or 2 terms. I always like to sit next to him at board meetings because he's really funny. And the board meetings would never be boring if he sat by Alan. But it was wonderful, So I got to use I have an education degree. I taught high school English and Spanish and some journalism and art in Bolivar and Seymour, Missouri, before running off to join the Wildwood Girls and then to work for IBMA. So I used, when I was growing up, I never thought, well, I'll have a bluegrass day job when I grow up. Such a thing didn't exist, really, that I knew of. And so, but the things that I studied and things that I learned, growing up playing music and my work as a journalist since I was 13, I wrote for the Cherokee Smoke Signal here in town. I was a feature editor. I got to interview Danny Bonaducci from the Partridge Family, and that was exciting. We were the same age. He's so cute. But anyway, Anyway, so I've been writing all these years, and you know, the great thing about writing, and I'm sure the same thing with radio, you'd say, Mike, is hearing people's stories. And so, you know, you get to ask these questions, and they tell you stories, and it's just fun. You know, I'm always interested in people's stories. And so what I had done up to that point helped me do what I did later. And of course, the organization grew, and my responsibilities grew. And so I did that from 94 to 2012 was when I took the interim executive director job when Dan Hayes decided to retire.
And she was the executive director when the IBMA moved from Owensboro, Kentucky to Nashville, Tennessee.
Well, actually, I wasn't. It was when we moved to Raleigh.
Raleigh.
Yeah, in 2013.
Okay.
Yeah, I was executive director in 2013 and 14, and then I consulted a little bit in 15, and that's why I left. Yeah.
And we were talking about the people that she's come across and worked with and played music with. I remember calling Nancy one evening, and she answered the phone, and she you know, where are you at? Well, I'm in Bela Fleck's basement right now. And I thought, what are you answering the phone for?
Probably because I thought you'd enjoy hearing about it. He's got a bass banjo, and he let me play it. It's taller than I am. It's the coolest thing. But anyway, he's got a recording studio down there. He and his wife, Abigail Washburn, wonderful people. And actually, I was with a friend of mine from Australia, Peter Nahuson, who he and his daughter were in town, and Bela had done some work for him at camps, banjo camps and things like that in Australia. We went over there. But Bela said, well, I've got something really cool I want to show you. And I said, okay. And he went to the corner of the room, and there was, you know, one of those Sears red metal cabinets with all these little drawers in it, you know what I'm talking about, that guys usually put, and women too, put tools in. He had banjo parts in it. And so every little drawer had like bridges or whatever, you know, some part of the banjo. And it was very cool in a banjo geek sort of way. Yeah. And he doesn't know how many banjos he owns. He said people keep giving them to him. And I asked Abigail how many she had, and I think she said 2. And I said, well, that's really all you need, right? Because, yeah.
Well, and we talked about the International Bluegrass Music Association, IBMA. What countries are the most behind bluegrass? You know, I know, of course, Japan, the Czech Republic, and where else is big with bluegrass?
Yeah, I would start with the 2 you mentioned. They're great bluegrass bands and musicians in the Czech Republic. Yeah. And some of the young musicians study classical music in Prague during the week, and then they play in bluegrass bands at night and at festivals. And, of course, the history of the dobro there, and just great bands there. All over Europe, in the United Kingdom, different places. It's really an international music.
Yeah,
you know?
And your membership there reflects that as well.
Yeah,
absolutely.
I made a friend the last year or two named Eric Shi from China, and he plays banjo and guitar, and his 11-year-old son is a really good pigger too, and he makes educational videos, and he got one of our Arnold Shultz Fund grants to help fund the videos over there. And so, but look him up. His last name's Shi, S-H-I, on YouTube. It's really good. But they're great bands in India, everywhere.
India.
Yeah.
Fabulous.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I know, I think it's the first foreign to us nation that I really noticed that was big was Japan, I guess. You know.
Yeah, I think the first international bluegrass band to tour in the States was from New Zealand, and just a month or two later was the Bluegrass 45 from Japan. And of course that was Saab and Toshio Watanabe and Akira Otsuka and Josh Otsuka. Can't remember the other guy's name. But anyway.
You've done well otherwise.
We're old friends, yeah.
Yeah, I know you've been very familiar with those guys for a long, long time.
And they're great, you know. I don't always understand the lyrics, but it's...
Well, that's a lot of stuff going on at IBMA, but I don't know if many of you knew that, well, some of you do, that Nancy's performed on the Grand Ole Opry. So please tell us about that.
Sure. I played with Jesse McReynolds and his Virginia Boys for most of 2017, and I didn't. My brother counts the number of times he has played the Opry, but I didn't count them. But it was fun. It was most of that year before I got married to the fellow in the back there in 2018 and left Nashville. But it was, I'd been friends with Jesse for a long time, and really there weren't that many national touring bands that came through Springfield when I was growing up. I have to give a shout out to Alan again. Country Gazette came here a lot, which was wonderful. We got to hear Country Gazette at least once a year, and Bill Monroe would come every once in a while, play at Lindbergh's or something like that. And occasionally, let's say I heard the Dillards a few times. I went to that festival in Salem.
Yeah.
Heard the Osborne Brothers once. It was probably at that festival. And Jim and Jesse, I remember Jim and Jesse played at a horse barn in Marshfield.
Oh.
And when they played loud and fast, the horses were kicking the stalls, and it was interesting. But you know, I just learned everything from my dad, and which was wonderful, you know, but I didn't, I'm not sure what my point was. What
I remember
were we talking
Jesse
about?
at a gig on
Jesse.
North Glenstone. I think it was both of them, on North Glenstone, at some place there. And but yeah, she was a Virginia boy.
I was. I didn't get one of those little ties, unfortunately. I really wanted one. But yeah, we were friends. I'd written about him several times, and he was good friends with the Cardwell Sisters and the Wildwood Girls.
Yeah.
And so when I played with them, we would cross paths at festivals and things like that. And
Now,
he's just a great guy, you know. I booked his band for a little while, and actually my brother Ray Cardwell was playing bass with him some before I did, but Ray was in Nashville to get his own career started and his own first album recorded, and then I ended up subbing for Ray, and then I ended up playing instead of Ray, you know. But Ray had plenty of other things to do.
Yeah.
And so it worked out. It was a lot of fun. You never knew what he was going to play. You know, you just show up early and go to dressing room number 2, which was the bluegrass room, bigger than life-size photograph of Bill Monroe on the wall. Yeah. And he'd play a couple of songs, and okay, we're going to do this one, and you'd run through it, and then you'd go on stage and do it, and that was it. You know, you didn't have time to get nervous or anything. So it was fun. It was a lot of fun.
And now, have you played at the actual Ryman as well?
Ray has. I didn't get to. They moved the show to the Ryman in the winter months because usually the crowds are smaller. So I was just at the Opry House most of the time.
Yeah, well, that's okay.
Yeah. I've been backstage before several times interviewing people or whatever, you know. I had a reason to be there usually. But it was fun. It was an honor to play that stage.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Jesse was so good. I mean, my gosh. One of the best mandolin players in the world, and invented a whole new style of playing, cross-picking.
Cross-pick.
Yeah, trying to sound like a banjo. But anyway, so it was a lot of fun.
Nancy is also an author, a book about, words and music of Dolly Parton, country music's Iron Butterfly. How was it researching that book and getting it published and all that?
Well, I was called at work and asked to do it. It wasn't my idea, and so I jumped at the chance. I thought, well, I've always admired Dolly Parton, her music and her writing, as well as her business savvy. She's just a real smart woman.
May we ask who called you to ask you?
The publisher, and ABC-Clio, Praeger Press, I think. Anyway, they're doing this series of books on artists, musicians from different genres of music who wrote most of their own material, mostly did original songs, and they'd never done any country musicians at all. They'd done Bob Dylan and Billy Joel and, you know, different people and pop music and stuff. So they wanted to start with Dolly, and so I said, sure, I'll try. You know, I've never written a whole book. I can handle an article and in a pretty busy schedule most of the time, but I would, on my lunch hours, I would leave our office on Music Row and drive over to the Country Music Hall of Fame and go in their library and put the headphones on and listen to Dolly Parton records, and one after another, and then look at the microfiche and, you know, look at old articles and things like that. And then I talked to people who had, talked to the fellow who gave her first recording contract, some former band members, some former producers, and things like that. And I was telling Miss Kitty and Alan earlier today that I'm really glad I did it. I mean, it worked me to death. I swear I'd never write another book while I was trying to work full-time at another job, but I'd got to talk to a lot of people and hear their stories who are no longer with us, you know, so I'm glad I got to do that.
You and Miss Kitty can share book publishing stories, can't you?
Well, I just have one. She has several. But it was fun, you know, and then they called me back later and wanted me to write one about Willie Nelson, but I just couldn't do it. So That sounds ridiculous, doesn't it? Yeah, I would now because I'm not working full-time. Well, actually, I'm working part-time, but I work full-time hours. My husband would tell you. Yeah.
I have to ask you about another job title of some kind, I guess you'd say. Nancy's a professional Girl Scout?
You
Question
betcha.
mark?
I'm a lifetime member of Girl Scouts of the USA. Been a Girl Scout since I was in second grade. Most years, more years than not. I sort of lost track on that too, 40-some. But anyway, so in between teaching jobs at Bolivar and Seymour, I worked for the Dogwood Trails Girl Scout Council here in Springfield. And I worked in the office, and I was an assistant camp director, waterfront director, did counselors and training work. And then I ended up being a field executive where I had 12 different places, towns that I would drive around and help the leaders do their jobs and help inspire them and help them, as volunteers. And then after I left the IBMA staff, I went to work for Girl Scouts of Middle Tennessee in Nashville. And there I was in charge of translating things into Spanish, and going to recruitment meetings with parents and speaking to them in Spanish because I was a high school Spanish teacher. And but I learned Spanish starting in 4th grade here in Springfield Public Schools, and we watched it on TV 3 times a week, and that's when I started learning when I was 9. And I've just always loved it. And I think speaking a foreign language to me is like playing an instrument. It's just a different channel that your brain clicks to, and it's just fun. Things don't translate exactly from one language to another. So if you learn a language, then you can understand that culture and that poetry and that music and those people better, I think. So it's fun. I wish I would have learned more. But anyway, so it was fun. Yeah, and then for the Girl Scouts, I also was the person who worked with the faith-based community. So I would go to churches and synagogues and mosques and try to get them to start Girl Scout troops. So that was fun. Did a lot of driving around. Did that for a couple years.
And earlier we mentioned and that's great work. I really, really think that's great work. Earlier we mentioned your brother, Ray Cardwell. The last couple touring seasons, he has been Dave Mason's bass player and singer. And didn't he do some work with the Beach Boys here also?
They played a show or a cruise or something with the Beach Boys. I think it was, they played in the same.
Yeah, okay.
Where they had more than one band playing on the bill.
Yeah.
He's really doing a great job.
He's doing a great job. He's just a brand new album, Bluegrass album, is out with her brother Ray on Americana Vibes label.
With Jeremy Garrett from the String Dusters.
Yeah. It's big, and I've played a couple of times on my Saturday night program. The ones. He's got timed releases on the singles, so
and a lot of original material again.
A lot of yeah,
and great bass playing and great singing. Ray can sing at least 4 octaves, sometimes more on a good day. He's just got a powerful voice. He can knock down walls with his voice.
Well, it just shows what's in the genetics there in your family.
And my sister was a really good, strong singer, too. I love singing harmony with her. And she was also in musical theater. She did a lot of Springfield theater stuff. She had, the lead role in Barnum, I think. And I'm trying to think of what else. She was in Annie. Did a lot of singing and dancing and theater stuff in addition to playing bluegrass. Did you know that?
No.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, she was the cheerleader and the gymnast, and, she could tap dance and things like that. I can barely walk across the floor. I could square dance because they give you directions. Yeah.
Well,
and my parents were in the promenaders too, so they were square dancers too. Yeah.
What have we not talked about tonight that you might want to make sure our folks kind of know about you or your career, or just a message you want to get out about yourself or bluegrass or something like that?
Gosh. I don't know. It's been a lot of fun, and it's still fun. I hope to play a lot more. It's it's a gift to be able to play music and enjoy music, and I'm just grateful, for all of it. I've had a lot of fun meeting people and making music with people in different bands, different kinds of bands, and It's been good. Our website at the Bluegrass Foundation, if you want to check out what I'm doing now, is bluegrassfoundation.org, and I've got some brochures over there if you want to read about that. And I've also brought some bluegrass music in the schools. We've got a lot of, 8 or 10 now college scholarships that we give away.
Yeah, let's talk more about the foundation
sure,
of which you're in charge of right now. Right?
Yeah, sure.
What's its mission?
Well, our mission, like I said before, is just to make the future of bluegrass music brighter, and so we give away scholarships and grants and sponsor educational programs for children and that sort of thing. So basically that's it. We have some grants. There's a grant named after a fellow named Fletcher Bright from around Chattanooga, Lookout Mountain, that helps kids age 20 and younger with educational bluegrass needs. And then Cindy Bauckham, who's syndicated radio, bluegrass radio host. Her husband, Terry Bauckham, is a famous banjo player, passed away recently, and she started the Terry Bauckham Bluegrass Education Grant. And it's the same type of thing to help people with the price of lessons or getting your instrument repaired or going to an Alamante bluegrass camp and taking lessons or something like that. So we do that, and then we've got something called the Arnold Shultz Fund, which is what's created to encourage people of color to get more involved in bluegrass music.
And tell our folks here who Arnold Shultz was.
Arnold Shultz was a really talented musician from western Kentucky, from around Rosine, where Bill Monroe, the father of bluegrass music, grew up. And he and his family had a string band, and he played the fiddle, he played the guitar. I learned recently, I didn't know this, that Uncle Penn, Bill Monroe's, both of his parents died when he was pretty young, and he went to live with his Uncle Penn, who was a fiddle player and played a lot of square dances. And so he played a lot with him, but Uncle Penn had fallen off a mule and he couldn't play for a while or something like that. And so Arnold Shultz played the fiddle, picked up the slack and played at the square dances. And he hired Bill for his first paying gig, as I heard it, and when he was a teenager. And so he was really good. He could play lead guitar, when a lot of people weren't doing that at that time, and would get on a boat, and go down to New Orleans when it got cold, and play with the jazz musicians, and could play anything. I really wish I could hear a recording of him, but they didn't. Black musicians weren't recorded or didn't win prizes or given awards at that point in our history, but. The people in Rosine that remembered him said that he played the guitar like a piano. It was just real full, and he could really get a lot of sound out of it, and kind of introduced passing chords and taught the local musicians how to play songs with more than 2 chords and things like that. And so he was just an influence on Bill Monroe. And a guy on our board, Richie Brown, is a dentist in Cambridge, and he's an African-American fellow, and he plays mandolin like Bill Monroe, very much in the style of Bill Monroe, and he is in his late 70s now, and he met Bill Monroe, I think, when he was 20, and Bill just got a big kick out of Richie, this young black kid in Boston playing his music and playing the mandolin, and whenever he would see him, he would invite him on the bus. And I remember, I think it was Roland White maybe said that he must really like you because he hasn't spoken to us for, several weeks. But yeah. He's mad about something, but anyway, so he would tell Richie about Arnold Shultz, because it reminded him of him. So, I feel like I have a second degree of separation from Arnold Shultz because I hear these stories from Richie Brown, who heard them from Bill. So it's kind of cool. But it's for black musicians, it's for Asian, Hispanic, it's people of color, people who have been kind of marginalized in the bluegrass music world. Traditionally, most bluegrass musicians were older white guys, and now women are just tearing it up. And but you don't see a lot of black bands or Chinese bands or whatever. They're out there, and I just think bluegrass music belongs to whoever wants to play it and whoever likes it, So
I was fortunate to hear a Bill Monroe story about Arnold Shultz from Bill Monroe himself. He played here, I think it was at Lindbergh's. Anybody go to that gig? Bill Monroe
I saw
played
him
at
there.
Lindbergh's. Roland White was driving the bus. He wasn't playing the music in the band, but he was driving the bus. I had another interview with him. It was at the Flagship Motel up on North Glenstone. He was playing another gig somewhere nearby. So I knocked on his door at the Flagship Motel, and it was there that he told me about his relationship with Arnold Shultz, and he credits him with that.
He was an influence on his approach to music, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, he just said that was the feel, the black feel, the African American feel there that Bill put in bluegrass music came from Shultz.
The lonesome thing.
Yeah.
Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah.
Be interesting to know all that. And then he died way too young. Arnold did when he was just in his 40s. He was poisoned with a moonshine. Wow. And the locals said that they believed that it was some white musicians who were jealous of his picking.
Well, you heard it here first.
Oh, well, it's been published before, I'm sure. But
the black community in the banjo?
Well,
it's in
Africa.
Yeah, it's an African instrument, and in the islands.
Yeah, it came out of Africa, whatever, if you want to call that a community, of course. But it's an African instrument to begin with at its roots.
There's a really great book that's been recently written called, let's see, I'm not sure I can think of the name, but it was written by Christina Gaddy, and Well of Souls or something like that, the story of the banjo. If you want to know all the answer to that, she's done a lot of recent research. But
these days, of course, there's some resurgence coming. It was back in the year 2000. "Oh Brother, Where Art Thou?" brought that attention to the music, and these days some young phenoms are coming up. A guy named Billy Strings among them, who just played on the Tonight Show the other night.
I think it was last Saturday, yeah.
Last Saturday.
He's great. He's a great picker.
Whatever night it was, just recently. But yeah, a great picker. But these young, talented, and I don't know what else to call them, some of them phenoms that are just amazing pickers on their instruments, amazing artists with their instruments. They're helping to bring a younger audience, I think, to the
and just
fold.
keep the music going. And
Yeah.
and the Youth and Bluegrass competition at Silver Dollar City that UNDA were involved with for years is a big part of that too. And it's so important to encourage young people to play, because they're the ones who are going to keep it going in the future.
Absolutely.
And you're right, they are so talented. A lot of festivals, there are a lot of older people there and not much kids, but at World of Bluegrass, there are lots and lots of young people playing music, lots of family bands, and some of them are just amazingly talented for their age. Yeah.
And DA and I have seen a lot of folks come out of that contest that we hosted at Silver Dollar City that are playing professionally these days, and it's really cool to see these kids. Time for questions? Is that what I'm getting that signal there? Anybody have questions for Nancy about anything
I
at
have
all?
to mention I enjoyed playing with Vic Jordan, too, when I was in a band called Pure Heart at Mutton Hollow in Branson. Vic had come to town to play with the Wayne Newton Orchestra, of all things. And the first time I was there, it was on a writing assignment for Branson's Country Review magazine, and Wayne Newton said, "And now we're going to have our rhythm guitar player, Vic Jordan, play Foggy Mountain Breakdown on the banjo." And I went, "What? Vic Jordan? He's a famous banjo player." And so we got to be friends. So during the day, Vic would play bluegrass in this basically all-girl band, which he really enjoyed, at a theme park, and then play with Wayne Newton at night. So that was a lot of fun. And he taught me how to read chord charts.
Oh,
yeah, the Nashville number system, yeah.
Cool. All right, questions, anyone? Who's the first person to raise their hand? I saw someone over here I thought I saw you raise your hand. I was pretty sure. Question, Kitty?
Nancy, you've just been successful in almost everything you've done in your whole life. And so I just want to ask you what your philosophy is for your life. What do you just look for opportunities, or do they come to you? Or what do you think you have that other people could have at the success you've had?
It does. I'm not sure how to answer that. I don't think I'm that big of a deal. Okay. I just, work hard at what I'm doing and try to learn more and do better at it. And I enjoy learning from other people, and sometimes opportunities come along. Sometimes you just really want to do something and you figure out how to do it and go after it. But I don't know if I have a specific answer for that. It's just...
Doesn't it help to have a good family?
Oh, yeah, that was, immense, sure. Yeah, Chris said, didn't it help to grow up in that family? It definitely did. Not everybody grows up in a band or a family where everybody plays music and your dad collects vintage instruments and they're just lying around the house and, and that sort of thing. So I was just really blessed to grow up that way. And so I'm not sure. I don't think I answered your question, but I'm grateful. It's been fun. There are so many, at IBMA and in interviewing people, I've talked to so many people that are just brilliant musicians. There's stories over there, recent stories I did with Del McCurry and Jerry Douglas and Tony Rice. Probably the only two people I've been nervous about talking to for an interview are Tony Rice and Herb Peterson. Oh. But I got through it. I was just kind of secretly nervous. But anyway.
We might add that when Nancy left here, not only that family relationship and the family power that took her to where she went, but the family of local musicians that are, many of which are here right now too. She went with that, aura and that power from the family that's from here all around us.
This is just really uncomfortable for me, Mike. I'm used to doing the interviewing and having the spotlight on somebody else. Well, I'll have to interview you sometime. But anyway, I think, what I was starting to say is, I worked shoulder to shoulder with all these great, talented, best in the world bluegrass musicians, and that can freak you out, or it can turn you into a germ, a fawning fan or something, but I try not to do that either, but I respect them, but I realize that there are always going to be people out there who are better than I am at playing music or writing. There are going to be people who are worse, and I'm just somewhere in the middle, and I just do what I do the best I can and try to get better at it, with God's help, But it's, I don't think about it a whole lot. I just try to treat everybody like a regular person and hope they do me.
We had a question back here in the back.
Yes, sir.
Yes, with Christmas around the corner, the child that's 8 or 10 or 12 years old that gets his first banjo or fiddle or...
What a lucky kid.
What advice would you give that child?
Find a good teacher and find other people to play with, to play music with. I think it really helps your rhythm and learning to play backup as well as lead, to play with in a group of people. And there are lots of beginner jams out there. Is the Greater Ozarks Bluegrass Society still going in Springfield?
Yes.
Gobs? Yeah, that'd be a good place to start. But the Chapmans, of course, have a great bluegrass music store here in town. So find a good teacher and practice.
And the Chapman store there, the acoustic shop, has instructors on staff.
And learn to tune. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's hard to sound very good if you're not in tune. Yeah.
That's the best advice all night.
Yeah.
Your Dolly Parton book, you said that you spent time listening to her music, going through the microfiche and talking to people that were in support roles with her. Did you interview Dolly or spend time with her?
I didn't for that book, but I had interviewed her briefly when I wrote an article about the Grascals, because she hired the Grascals to open up for her for one of her tours several years ago. I think there's a picture over there where I'm standing with all of them and Dolly. She's about this tall. I didn't realize she was so tiny, and she had her big, 6-inch heels on too. But I thought, well, that's why they call her Dolly. She's just this little doll, Wow. But anyway, and then I crossed paths with her a couple other times, and she was always very nice, but I didn't get to interview her for that particular book. I think because she has her own books about herself. And
she was releasing her own book right after yours was published, if I recall.
I don't remember. She does so many things. It's hard to keep up with her. She has a new idea. I think the woman wakes up with a dozen new ideas every single day, and the hard part is figuring out which one to do first. I mean, she's got these cake mixes in the grocery store, and she's got the movies, and she just does everything. It's amazing. But it was fun.
Yours was 2011?
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, when that was done.
But it was a lot of fun.
Any other questions? Oh, come on.
Well, I would say this, that when you're talking about your influence, it's, I met you in Reed Springs, and that opened my eyes to a lot of music in this area, and it's just, the Ozarks seems to be this endless fountain of talent that continues.
It is. It was a great place to grow up. There's a lot of wonderful music here, a lot of wonderful musicians, and a lot of inspiration.
When I first moved here to Ozarks, I went around the square and I heard this music from this ramshackle shack there.
Oh, yeah.
And I stopped, I got out of the car, and they were, what are you doing? I went in there, they were playing, it was just wonderful.
Yeah.
And what was really unusual was to see a black man playing the stand-up bass.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd ask people, I said, where did he come from? And nobody ever introduced, but he lived in a house at the top of the hill there, was related to the Beddells and stuff like that.
Mm-hmm. Well, I remember Ray Woods, is that his name? The bass player that would, that was one of the fun things that I would do as a teenager with my friends when we weren't, cruising Kearney or going to Shakey's or some Shotgun Sam's. We would go to Ozark and drive around the square, and then we would stop at this gym and go play with all the old pickers, all the old guys. And it was great, yeah. Yeah, it was wonderful. And there were jam sessions, and there still are, I think, in old schoolhouses, and just the fiddling in Missouri alone is mind-boggling. Just great fiddle players from Missouri and great family bands, and so it was a good place to grow up, definitely.
We love it here because of our music.
Yeah, and I've been writing songs off and on. Well, I wrote a song about our family band that we used to do at our performances, and just, it was called Family Band, that we close out our shows with at the Ozark Scenic Riverways campgrounds. We would go down to different campsites in the 70s, in the late 70s, and play for the campers when they come off the rivers, and that was a lot of fun. And then when I went away to college as a junior, farther away from home to Maryville, Northwest Missouri State, I got homesick, and so I wrote Green Persimmon Trees because I missed the Ozarks. And so I've written songs, over the years, and was involved with the Ozark House Concert Series with Patty Van Wilden and Julie.
Yes, you remember
Donnelly.
the Ozark House Concert Series, right?
And got to hear lots of great songwriters. But recently, since COVID, I've been writing on Zoom with a guy named Rick Lang up in New Hampshire. And it's a lot of Christmas songs and bluegrass gospel songs, but it's fun. I really enjoy co-writing with other people, and I tend to be a better writer than I am a person to think up melodies. And so if I can work with somebody who's good at making up original tunes, it works out
Rick
well.
Lang's one of the best.
He's good. He's a super nice guy.
he is.
Yeah, so we just make appointments and write songs. And a fellow in Georgia named Tom Brown, I write some with him too. So I hope to do more of that. And I still just love to play the bass, so any chance I get to play. I haven't found a band where I live now in the middle of North Carolina, in Burlington yet, but a real bluegrass band. But I'm playing some in a duo with a lady who's my fitness teacher at the Y, and we do some original music, and I'm teaching her bluegrass songs. But anyway.
It's perfect.
Oh, and my husband and I play the Prelude at our church the second and fourth Sunday every month, and so I'm thinking of calling us the Prelude Valley Boys. And so we just, look at the scripture, the sermon, and we find an old hymn, and we learn it that morning or the night before when we get up and play it, and we sit down, and Bob says, well, we fooled him again. He plays guitar, plays the banjo too, but not much anymore, mostly guitar. So that's fun. I played more hammer dulcimer since I've moved.
Oh, good. Yeah. And, well, let's just leave it at that. Folks, anything
Thank you all.
else? That's it? Thank you.
That's all, yeah.
Thank you, Nancy.
Thanks.
How about a hand, yeah. We feel like we got to know you a little bit better, Nancy, and thank you, Mike, for doing this.